Sticks and stones may break your bones and words may kill you. That's the argument many Republicans have been making over the weekend, that the language used by Democrats enabled the assassination attempt. For example, one of Trump's top contenders for his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, tweeted, quote, "Today is not just some isolated incident. The central premise of Biden's campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs." That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination. And Senator Tim Scott, who's also been floated as a potential VP pick, wrote, quote, "Congressman Scalise, Justice Kavanaugh, and now President Trump, for years, Democrats and their allies in the media have recklessly stoked fears, calling President Trump and other conservatives threats to democracy. Their inflammatory rhetoric puts lives at risk."
The popular X account End Wokeness shared this recent clip of former Senator Claire McCaskill on MSNBC with the caption, "This rhetoric is what got us here." Let's watch it.
A lot of people have tried to draw similarities between Mussolini and Hitler and the use of the terminology like vermin and the drive that those men had towards autocracy and dictatorship. The difference, though, I think makes Donald Trump even more dangerous, and that is he has no philosophy he believes in. He is not trying to expand the boundaries of the United States of America. He's not trying to overcome a neighboring country like Putin is in Ukraine. He is not going for some grandiose scheme of international dominance. All he wants is to look in the mirror and see a guy who's president. All he cares about is selfish self-promotion. That's the only philosophy he has, which makes him even more dangerous because he has actually said out loud that it would be okay to terminate the Constitution to keep him in power.
But CNN's Anderson Cooper doesn't think the rhetoric is a one-sided problem. Watch his exchange with House Speaker Mike Johnson.
But here's the thing. I mean, it's an objective truth that Donald Trump is probably the most persecuted and attacked political figure in history, certainly among presidents, maybe at least since Abraham Lincoln, Civil War era. And that takes a toll. I mean, when my colleagues go out, Democrat colleagues, and say democracy will end, the republic will be in an emergency stage if Donald Trump wins for president, it's just not true. It's another election. And when they say that kind of rhetoric and they heat it up like that, there are people out there that take these things to heart and they act upon them. Politicians are not responsible for that, but we do have a responsibility to be responsible. I mean, we're not asking for much. Let's just dial the rhetoric down. Let's have a vigorous debate. That's what our country's built upon, but we have to see one another as fellow Americans and not enemies.
I do want to point out, just for fairness, I don't want to get into an argument about this, but the former president himself has also used that kind of rhetoric. He said on June 27th, Joe Biden is a threat to democracy, a threat to the survival and existence of our country itself. That's certainly the same kind of language you're talking about.
Listen, everybody is prone to overstatement, okay? I mean, a few days ago, earlier this week, Joe Biden actually said we need to put Donald Trump in the bullseye. I mean, right? I don't think either of those men meant to imply anything beyond just rhetoric, but the point is the rhetoric has consequences.
Meanwhile, journalist Michael Schellenberger called out The Atlantic for an article blaming Trump for his own assassination. In the article, The Atlantic wrote, quote, "Violence stalks the president who has rejoiced in violence to others." And, quote, "Now the bloodshed that Trump has done so much to incite against others has touched him as well." So yes, lots of conversation on social media about the role rhetoric played in what happened. Now, look, maybe you can say turnabout is fair play, because it is the case that 4 years, with mass shootings and with other things happening, the reaction to the shooting of Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, a Democrat in Arizona, by a deranged gunman, the reaction to that from the New York Times, the media, from Democrats, was that Republican rhetoric has inspired this kind of attack, and it was the blast target zone map was specifically where they had Republicans had put out a map showing a gun target over her district, and that kind of thing. They were blamed explicitly for this. Republicans were, even though there was zero evidence that the shooter had seen the map or that he was even motivated by Republican politics or was even particularly conservative. He was just a crazy person, and so on. So I get that now Republicans feel like this is their moment to do that same thing. Like the bullseye comment, I mean, come on. I don't, that's just the way, that to me that's the same thing as the Target thing over the map for Gabby Giffords. I think we got to be very careful about casually blaming heated rhetoric for. We don't even really know what motivated this guy. We don't even know that he's like some committed blue anon Democrat type person. We don't know. And in any case, it is certainly true that Trump and many Republicans use heated rhetoric as well. Since I'm a free speech guy, I'm always very, very much not on board with like blaming other people's rhetoric for your violent actions. Your violent actions are your fault, and no one made you do it, and I want more caution there. So I did not particularly enjoy these comments from J.D. Vance, who's our potential next vice president, rumored to be the pick. We're going to find out later today. Speaker Mike Johnson and others saying that it's really, the violent rhetoric of Democrats is what causes this kind of thing. Everyone can turn down their rhetoric, and that would be nice, but let's not lose sight of, people's actions have consequences.
Yeah, the way I see this election is we have two guys motivated by ego. Sarah McCaskill's a little bit right about that, or Claire McCaskill's a little bit right about that. I think that when we consider Joe Biden wants to continue running despite the top donors in his party, his top advisors, behind closed doors telling reporters they want him to step down, but a lot of people just publicly saying they want him to step down. And he's saying, absolutely not, I want to be the president. It seems very ego-driven. A lot of people have labeled it as such. Donald Trump's rise to power, a lot of people have also labeled as ego-driven. His former producers at his reality TV show, The Apprentice, have said that he's very ego-driven and views the world
people in politics
terms of
are almost by definition
and ego-driven. Right, and couldn't be more disconnected from the American people. And so the way I think we should all be processing this event is that we've been told by either side that there's a threat existentially to our existence, whether it's democracy, whether it's freedom. And there's really not. But a lot of people feel it because they're struggling to afford health care. They're struggling to pay their bills to keep a roof over their head the next week. They feel a threat to their existence. They feel like they're tinkering on the edge of being homeless, of being without food, being without the ability to provide for their families. And both parties, every person in the ruling class in the United States is responsible for that and complicit in that. And so the idea that we're being told you belong to this tribe, and actually, if you're a Democrat, the Republicans are a threat to your existence. And if you are a Republican, you're told the Democrats, for whatever reason, are a threat to your existence. And that is causing people to think, okay, well, if I do this great act and I put my own life on the line, I'll be able to protect our existence. That's a very scary place for our politics to be. And it's sad that it's the same people saying political violence is never acceptable that are totally okay with people struggling to make ends meet, people dying because they can't afford health insurance, people losing their homes and living on the streets. Is that not political violence too? Because there are policy failures that result in that being reality every day for everyday people in America.
Well, policy has taken a back seat in terms of Democratic messaging about the threat that they say Trump represents, right? It's all about the threat to the institutions. It's all about the threat to the process. It's been less and their approach has been to talk less and less about issues. I think one of the reasons Donald Trump is doing so well, apart from the spectacularly positive news cycle he's enjoyed for the last several weeks, is that they show Trump is more trusted on the issues right now that matter to Americans the most, immigration, the state of the economy, and so on. Whatever Trump is doing and saying on these issues is winning the support of the people, while at least at the elite level, Democrats and Democratic media are solely focused on the kind of threat to democracy. And I do think, I mean, it is, I'm seeing some in that camp being asked, okay, if you've said Trump is a Hitler-esque figure and that democracy could end if he's elected, does that, this is from the perspective of someone questioning someone who feels that way. Does that justify then taking some kind of extraordinary action to prevent him from winning the election? Now, I would say obviously not. You can't say democracy is under assault and this is also bad, and then say, and I'm willing to do totally anti-democratic things, including commit violence to stop this kind of shock to the system. That's the sort of just, you know, blind leading the blind kind of approach to politics. Now, I'm not seeing anyone actually defend that. What they're saying is, you know, the rhetoric, it's sometimes too heated, but there has been rhetoric on the other side. And, you know, people would benefit from, you know, turning down the dials, I think, in general, or concentrating, like you said, more on actual policy differences. Describe what you think the threat is on policy, or how you think working people's lives are going to be worse because of this or that policy, and, you know, not make these infantile Hitler comparisons all the time.
Right. And of course, Trump's camp is saying immigration's this existential threat. When they talk about immigration, they're not being precise about policy or what the numbers look like, or the reality that Biden has deported more Haitian migrants than any president before him. They're not talking about how he's increased personnel at the border.
No one wants to talk about that, because Democrats don't want to admit that, and Republicans don't want to admit that.
Exactly. And so it's true that the stance of Democrats is somehow both. Yeah. Trump is an authoritarian fascist like Hitler, and we should never use political violence to address that, despite the categorization of World War II and fighting Hitler and fighting fascism being called the only just or the only good war ever. So political violence made sense there. Simultaneously, you have a genocide happening in Gaza, and Democrats saying political violence is never acceptable. When political violence is used as the reason, they're attacking Hamas leaders, Hamas soldiers, some of which who are children, and also civilians. And so at what point do we just say, both parties are so hypocritical, they're clearly making up these threats to existence to maintain their power, and really they don't care if an authoritarian takes over on one side, and they don't care if Democrats take over on the other side. They're willing to use this rhetoric to get as many votes as possible because they care about one thing, and that's power. Yeah,
they're not even, for Democrats saying that Trump is Hitler, right, but they're not even willing to swap out to Joe Biden's feelings that he should still be running for re-election somehow, even when they show Kamala Harris polls showing her still losing but doing better against Trump than Biden, having more of a chance. They're like, nah, we're not going to. We need to stop Hitler, but it's not so important that we're going to like risk hurting Biden's feelings. Like, that seems to be what their operating strategy is. Again, that's not from my perspective. That's from their perspective. And I think a lot of people are going, huh? Did his feelings matter that much? I know he's really enjoying this run for president, but that's more important than, again, from their perspective, I don't think Trump is Hitler, but they're saying Trump is Hitler. You start to think that they don't actually believe it. It's just a rhetorical strategy.
I think it's possible they believe it and they just don't care, because like we've seen many Democrats now say, the point of having Joe Biden become the president when Bernie could have beat Trump was actually because we wanted a candidate that could beat Bernie Sanders, not we wanted a candidate that could beat Donald Trump. Joe Biden did by a very slim margin, and it's not looking too good in 2024, but he's still the candidate. They hate the far left more than they hate the right, and they won on progressive policies.
There is something to that. More Rising right after this.